Kadrina here. Just as a preamble, I had my wisdom teeth removed a couple days ago before recording this, so if I'm slurring and stuttering and gasping for breath more than usual while I'm recording this, that's why. Anyways, let's get into it. Today I'm going to be reviewing a book called The Clockmaker's Daughter by Katie Morton, who has apparently written acclaimed books like The Forgotten Garden, The Secret Keeper, The Distant Hours, and The Lake House. All New York Times bestsellers. Before I begin, I'm not knocking her for her published books. As someone who has published 0 books, I am a little envious, but I haven't heard of any of these books, and absolutely no shade toward the people who are on the New York bestsellers list, but you can actually pay to put yourself on that list, so frankly, it means absolutely nothing to me. But yeah, she's written 4 other published books besides this one, and felt the need to plaster her face on the back of the cover, so it's game on. I'm going to be expecting high quality work here, Missy. Digs aside, a little bit about this book is I got it in October 2018 as a Book of the Month book. The referral link is in the description, but basically it's a book subscription similar to Audible, where you can pick 1 out of 5 books shipped directly to your house, $15 a month. Additional books are $9.99. They are hardcover, so it's a pretty good deal, though I will warn you the books are hit or miss. We'll be discussing that in a later review. But if you want to check it out, please feel free to use my referral link down in the description so that we can both get a free book, and I can continue to grow my backlog of books I have to review. Anyway, back to our scheduled programming. The Clockmaker's Daughter. As we have established, it was written by a multi-published writer, Kate Morton, and is 482 pages long, and is broken up into 5 parts with alternating chapters between the ghost point of view, and 12 sections marked off with Roman numerals, and 28 other chapters that span the time period after this incident to the summer of 2017. I'm going to be real with you all, I have read this book twice, but not because it was good. Frankly, parts were unbearable, but we'll get into that in a minute. For now, just know I read this twice. I did enjoy it more the second time though, so that was something. As another aside, I'm going to come off as a rambling mess, but that's the book's fault for that. This was a rambling mess, so fight me. The book was marked as a historical mystery novel, surrounded by the death of a railroad heiress and the mysterious disappearance of a jewel thief. But it's very clear from the very first long-winded "look how spooky I am" chapter is exaggerated by the fact she suffocated to death. But how did they die? Who shot poor Fanny? And who is this mysterious Birdie character we barely learn the name of a quarter into the book, who is essentially the title character? Well, during the final act, I found out it was a nice criminal named Martin Mack who shot Fanny, and Lucy Radcliffe accidentally suffocated her brother's fiancée by shoving her in the priest hole and leaving her there for 20 years. Surprise. Really, that's the whole thing. Really, the whole thing is trite and really of no consequences, as the side stories are far more interesting, but I digress. I'm not going to go into depth with the characters at this time because frankly there's too many of them, and all of them in their own way bore me, except for Ada and Lucy. Those are bad mamma jammas. But the 2 main characters are Albertine Birdie Bell, the ghost in the wall, who is also referred to as
Lily Millington,
and I'm going to butcher this name, Elodie Winslow, the girl cast internally by her mother's shadow and hates it there, until someone doesn't know her mother, Lauren Adler, to which she replies she was a famous celloist who died. Please, Jack, run. Far away from this girl and all her baggage. She's just another Sarah. Anyways, the 2 main characters, but not really, sets it up like Elodie is about to go on a grand search for this mysterious woman behind a portrait by some innate hunger to do such that is insatiable. And then she disappears from the book about a third of the way through, which actually makes the book about 100 times better, but besides the point. Backing up a little bit. Elodie is an archivist for the Stratton, Conwell & Co. Foundation and is in charge of the Stratton Archive. She comes across a box that has been stored in a coat closet where she finds a mysterious satchel, sketchbook, and portrait of a beautiful woman, Birdie, which is what starts the chain of events. She is excited by this as it's a sketchbook that contains illustration of Birchwood Manor where Birdie died on the fateful night and is reminiscent of a story that happened to one of the other characters, the long-suffering artist, Edward Radcliffe, who told Birdie that told her great-uncle Tip, who told her mother, the dazzling Laura Adler, who told her. Told you there was a lot of unnecessary characters. As a small aside, we never actually hear the story except we're summarized to us by Lucy, so bonus for that one, making an integral part of the story that is brought up constantly, but not actually sharing anything from the past as cliff note with the readers. Only, Elodie fizzles off and ends up solving this mystery when an act of nature knocks down the tree where Lucy buried Birdie, and all the information about her in the 3rd to last chapter within the last 20 pages. Yeah. Great storytelling, Chief. And that's all you need to know about the book's central plot. Another thing is, the title is The Clockmaker's Daughter. This is in reference to Birdie, who's the daughter of the clockmaker. But that has very little bearing on the actual story itself. Both her parents die very early on into into the book when Birdie was very, very young, and so she ends up mostly being turned to the streets, so it's a very odd title for something that has absolutely no bearing on the book, except for Edward gives her a clock. So yeah, there you go. That's all you need to know about the central plot of this book. Yeah. Okay, again, extreme humor aside, this book has glimmers of good parts to it, but are overridden by the bad storytelling and bad characters. Again, this book is 482 pages, which is a long book, but there's very little build-up, and this book could frankly have been reduced in size. So let's talk about what Katie Morton did right in these critical topics: the characters, the plot, and the storytelling. First of all, let me just say that this book is bizarre, and the fact that the only real description we get from any of the characters is that's not directly related to their height and build or clothing choice is hair color on occasion, when it comes up with Elodie, Radcliffe, Birdie, and Fred, and even then it's very limited. I don't think I've had a clear picture of what any of these characters look like, except that they're all attractive and think they're all ugly. Well, that's a lie, besides Pale Joe Stratton, who's obviously called Pale Joe because he's pale and sickly, but overall, none of these characters are really given faces. We don't even know about Elodie's hair color until literally the last 30 pages. This is weird because the rest of the book has long rambling lines of color like this gem found on page 312. For all that, it was not the most comfortable place to work. The dressing table, upon which she positioned her typewriter, was pretty but not ideal when one had legs to accommodate. Juliet liked it very much. Yep, that was one long run-on sentence. Right after it, we have tendrils of fragrant honeysuckle and clematis reached through the open window to clutch at the curtain fastenings and the view over the orchard towards the village, in particular the church at the end of the lane, was restorative. Okay, ignoring the run-on sentence, by the time you get that done swallowing that mouthful, you don't even remember what the subject of what was restorative. But the point is, Morton has a high attention to detail to the point she tries very hard to show, not tell, but fails spectacularly in several ways, character description being one of them. The other one being character archetype. So I really don't like Elodie. That much is clear. She goes through long, drawn-out paragraphs about how she's not like other girls and enjoys the mustiness of archives, which you do you, boo. But don't tear someone down for liking other things, okay? Especially when you're 31 years old and getting married to a guy you don't even like. Look, I was a lot like Elodie when I was younger. I thought I was special for not being girly and being a tomboy instead. I looked down at my nose at those social types. But as I got older, you know what I realized? People are multidimensional. You can like those things. Elodie and Morton need to realize that too. They're old enough for it. Anyway, back on Elodie and her mom complex. I want to point out that I understand that grief takes a long time to heal, and I'm not surprised she has mommy issues. What drives me bonkers, though, is how Elodie brings up her mother and compares herself to her, sometimes selfishly wishing she was not in Lauren Adler's shadow, and grateful when she's not, but then feels the need to brag about it subtly to a man she just met. Later points out that her fiancé is more in love with her mother than her, but she doesn't love him at all. Lauren Adler is the more interesting of the two for the good reason. A famous celloist who was cut down in her youth, she marries a man she somewhat loves to conceal the parentage of her child, who is the daughter of a married violinist. While this poor chap is raising their child, she is off traveling the globe with this important unnamed violinist until her life is tragically cut short due to not wearing a seatbelt in the summer of 1992. 25 years later, her family still grieves. But seriously, the early third of this book has instances where it hints at the affair but wanting to make it secretive with obvious information, but not really. At one point, Elodie makes a remark about how the coroner report can't explain why they had taken that side street coming up, kind of like she is going to try to solve this mystery. And then when she's confronted with her mother's affair by a picture given to her by a famous photographer named Caroline, she is unsurprised. She knew it all along. Like, okay. Which, as an aside, does everybody know everybody in London? This book has bits where we're all connected, and while I sort of like the theme, and parts of it get creepy. Like the fact Caroline took this picture of the day Lauren Adler died, developed it later, but didn't publish it because she saw Elodie in the news, and then waited years to meet her because she's some special snowflake outside of her mother. Again, I know I sound like a random rambling mess, but how can I not when this is literally a paragraph in the book? She thought of you on and off over the years, she said, and wondered what had become of you. Reasonable. She felt connected to you because of what happened, as if by taking that photograph on that day, preserving that particular moment between them, she had become part of their story. When she realized that you and I were friends, when you had come to see my final year art show, she told me the urge to meet you was irresistible. Macabre. Like, lady, let it go. This poor girl's mother has been dead for almost 15 years at this point. You drop it by then, not hanging on to it for another 10 years to give it to her for flavor, plot, and intrigue, and as a way to get the story to move. But yeah, there are other connections to the house and Birdie long after she's gone, like how Lucy taught Ada, who later let Tip, who could see ghosts, namely Birdie, and both knew the story. Ada gave Tip this priceless pendant called the Radcliffe Blue that Birdie alleged stole, but was stolen and concealed by Lucy, and Tip turned it into a keepsake box for Elodie, who was trying to solve the mystery, and still it is gone from the world as far as everyone knows. Jumbled mess. On their own, very interesting. Even together without Elodie, fine. But otherwise, there's too many pieces to sort through, and the real questions left unanswered. The other main character, Birdie, is marginally better of a character. Honestly, I love the way Morton describes her youth and growing up in the streets. It's woven a lot better of a tale than to have to read long scrolling paragraphs about what a spooky ghost Birdie is, and how she watches everyone and everything. Ooh, really is trying too hard. However, I do not like how Morton uses Birdie sometimes to confirm information that we've learned in previous chapters. It's lazy. There's one thing I hate when an author treats the readers like they're dumb. Having to reiterate things with no new added information or insight is lazy, and most importantly, it's insulting, and poor Birdie is used as a prop for this one too many times. However, the even more infuriating thing is that Morton seems to know how to do it well, like in the instance where we see Leonard, a guy writing a book on Edward and Lily Milton, aka Birdie, encounter Juliet, Tip's mother, sleeping in the field on her honeymoon after storming off. We later see Juliet's perspective, which is interesting. And one way it's done poorly is by introducing Juliet as simply a name about 150 chapters before you actually introduce the character, which segues us into the plot. I like the concept of the plot, the turning up of a dusty old history to reveal some valuable information. The orphan who inspired a man to clean up the River Thames, and a woman who stole the artist's heart and ended up being the downfall for his fiancée before disappearing. The interconnection of all these stories over the past 150 years. However, at some point, Morton clearly lost focus of the story she was trying to tell. I think she ran into the same problem as Gower did, where she became too ambitious and had to cut down the ending of The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock, which led to it feeling rushed. However, this book had been properly edited and polished, and some of the added details removed, then it would have been enough time to show Elodie going through the mystery and coming to terms with the fact she didn't love Alistair. We could even see her falling in love with Jack a little because he's smitten by her for some weird reason. Removing the continued mentions of the haunting house at the beginning of half of the Birdie chapters is one way to do it. Also, stop using her as a piece to reiterate things that we just learned a few pages, if not a few paragraphs before, would be helpful. Restructuring and reordering the pages so that we can see the flow through chronological order of the events, with Elodie and Jack discovering it in between. Heck, removing so many of the mentions of how Elodie feels inferior to her mother, or her mother's entire cheating plotline, and Elodie's own wedding would give the book more room to breathe. Really, it adds nothing, with Tip being enough of a drawing point and parallels in history that, while are interesting, are too many to be reasonable. For example, Elodie and Birdie lost their mothers, which affected their fathers deeply. Both were brought up to be something they weren't. Both shunned basic society but needed it. Elodie and Edward were marrying people that they truly did not love for status. Tip lost his father as well. Ada nearly drowned, but was saved by Birdie, so one of her tormentors drowned instead. Jack's brother drowned, saving him. Both Edward and Birdie's fathers were hit by carriages. Any one of these threads alone might have been interesting and good ways to bond the characters. Heck, even 2 or 3 parallels might have worked. But I have the feeling Morton got lost in her own characters and got them all jumbled up to the point she couldn't recognize them because she had gotten too ambitious. Instead, Jack is rather this dead weight that offers nothing except to get Elodie into the museum a couple of times. He is the reason she is there to find Birdie's remains, sure, but otherwise he really doesn't offer much to the story. Lucy, dear Lucy, is relegated to the wizard character who gives the quest while knowing the secret the entire time, that she is the one who had the Radcliffe Blue, the fated diamond, and that Lillington did not run off with it, but was actually killed by her own hand. And when she had time to come clean with Leonard, she acted dumb except for hinting that Lily did not truly run off with the diamond. It's too busy. There's too many characters that we don't care about because they are only connected to the house and by Birdie, but they didn't know Birdie. And now for the storytelling. Again, there's instances where the story is really well told, and I got enthralled with it. There are other scenes that are not so much. I would dare say that it's almost like they were written by 2 separate people. You can tell where Morton is interested, and then you can tell where there is flavor text. Hint, most of Elodie's scenes are flavor text. The Ada, the Birdie, and Leonard stories are the ones where the most loves were given, because you can tell that these characters have the most personality. Juliet sort of has some of that, but not as much, and Tip is just meant to bridge the gap between the old and the new by giving Elodie that connection. Nothing more, nothing less. Adding to the run-on sentences that are sometimes their own paragraphs, Morton does have some varying sentence structure, but there are very few short sentences romances mixed in with the bohemian myths. On top of it all, she makes you show not tell in the strangest manner. She has no problem showing the scenery, but will easily tell you what's in the character's heart. I think this is in due part to the fact there's not a lot of action and even discussion going on in this book. It reads like a story you would hear from a companion tell you at a slumber party. It's like secondhand knowledge rather than us having these characters step you through it all, with the exception of Bertie's part. Overall, I get the feeling this is a mismatch of several different books rather than one, and this book needs to be heavily revised. If it was at all revised and edited, it would probably never saw the light of day. And as harsh as it sounds, this is not a complete story. Lastly, there is some folklore mixed in the form of a story Edward tells Lucy and Bertie about how he encountered the house and where it used to be. It is later passed on to Ada and Tip, who passes it on to Lauren and then her daughter, but the reader never actually gets to hear the story outside of Bertie and Lucy explaining how Edward got lost in the woods after being chased by a black dog and took refuge in the house. For such an integral part of the story, there's nothing, but that's a common theme in this book, sadly. Anyways, after listening to me ramble about the story, can I recommend it? Probably not. Will I read other books by the acclaimed Morton, even if they're supposedly better? Probably not. Will parts of her voice speak to me, others just do not appeal. But if you like it or want to try it, I do recommend giving it a try. Plenty more people seem to enjoy it than not. Anyways, that's all for this time. Next time we'll be reviewing 9 Perfect Strangers by Liana Moratti.